Welcome to a training session on occupational health and safety for supervisors. As a member of your company's leadership team, it's important that you understand both your company's and your own responsibilities and how you can help meet these responsibilities. The purpose of this training session is to assist members of the leadership team in better understanding how the occupational health and safety legislation applies to both themselves and the company. We will also review some of the critical changes made to our Occupational Health and Safety Act in 2018, discuss how you might be able to meet the responsibilities or meet your due diligence through the 5 C's. We will discuss external reporting responsibilities and the importance of maintaining effective documentation. Most Alberta employers fall under provincial health and safety legislation. The provincial occupational health and safety legislation consists of 3 parts: the Act, the regulation, and the code. An updated version of the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety Act came into effect on June 1st of 2018. This was the largest change made to this legislation since 1976. Scheduled revisions to the code and the regulations are to follow within a 2-year period scheduled for 2020. Clear occupational health and safety expectations have been outlined in the new legislation for all levels within an organization, as well as contractors, self-employed personnel, prime contractors, service providers, temporary staffing agencies, and suppliers. When you ask who is responsible for the occupational health and safety of employees, the answer might seem obvious. It is the employer. It may be clear that the employer is responsible for the health and safety of their workers, or it may seem obvious that they should be. What might not be as clear is who is the employer. According to the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety Act, employer means a person who employs or engages one or more workers, including a person who employs or engages workers from a temporary staffing agency, a person designated by an employer as the employer's representative, or a director or officer of a corporation, or a person employed by the employer who oversees the occupational health and safety of the workers employed by the corporation or the employer. It's important to look at another piece of legislation, our criminal code. Section 217 of the Criminal Code states that everyone who undertakes or has the authority to direct how another person does work or performs a task is under a legal duty to take reasonable steps to prevent bodily harm to that person or any other person arising from that work or task. As you can see, between these 2 pieces of legislation, there are many positions within a company that could be considered the employer. It doesn't really matter where on an organizational chart you might be or what your job title is. If you direct the work of another, you have responsibilities and accountabilities. Let's look at the obligations of the employer. OHS legislation indicates that employers must do what is reasonably practicable to ensure the health and safety and welfare of workers, other workers on the site, and other persons in the vicinity. Employers must ensure workers are aware of their rights and duties under the legislation and any issues arising from the work being conducted. They must ensure workers are not subject to or participate in harassment or violence. Ensure workers are supervised by a person who is competent and familiar with the relevant OHS legislation. Resolve in a timely manner any issues brought forward by supervisors, self-employed persons, workers, and the health and safety representative or committee. Consult and cooperate with the health and safety representative or committee and exchange information on the health and safety matters to resolve issues. Advise prime contractor when required the names of all supervisors. Our occupational health and safety legislation clearly outlines responsibilities for supervisors. In the Occupational Health and Safety Act, they define supervisor as a person who has charge of a worksite or authority over a worker. It must be understood that a supervisor can also be a manager and/or a business owner, depending on whether or not you have charge of a worksite or authority over a worker. Supervisor is an all-encompassing term. It has nothing to do with your company's organizational chart or your job title. Let's look at some of the obligations of supervisors outlined in our Occupational Health and Safety Act. The Act indicates that supervisors are expected to do what is reasonably practicable to ensure they are competent to supervise every worker under their supervision, take all necessary precautions to protect the health and safety of every worker under their supervision, ensure each worker under their supervision works within legislated expectations, ensure each worker uses all required hazard controls and wears required personal protective equipment, and ensures that none of the workers under their supervision are subject to or participate in harassment or violence at the workplace. Supervisors must also advise workers under their supervision of all reasonably foreseeable hazards related to the work they're performing. Report to the employer concerns about unsafe or harmful acts that occur or has occurred, or an unsafe or harmful condition that exists or has existed. They must cooperate with any person exercising a duty imposed by the OHS legislation and comply with OHS legislation themselves. You might be wondering what it means to do what is reasonably practicable. Reasonably practicable can be defined as taking reasonable care and can be measured what is known as a reasonable person test. If you were to select 12 of your peers, would they say that you did what was reasonable and what was practical to protect your workers? One of the first parts of the Act that we're going to review is entitled Duty to Provide Information. This is a newer section in our Act and covers multiple areas where information must be provided to various sources. In this section, it indicates that health and safety information means information that may affect the health and safety of a person at a worksite and includes information about hazards at the worksite, hazard controls, and work practices and procedures. It also indicates that this information does not include personal information about an identifiable individual, confidential proprietary information, or trade secrets. The Act indicates that employers shall keep readily available all health and safety information and provide that information to the health and safety representative or committee, as well as the prime contractor if there is one. The section also indicates that employers must make a current copy of the occupational health and safety legislation readily available to workers and the health and safety representative or committee. The Act indicates that every prime contractor or contractor shall ensure that the owner and any employer, supplier, service provider, or self-employed person on a worksite is informed of any existing or potential worksite hazards that may affect workers, self-employed persons, or other persons at the worksite. In turn, every owner shall ensure that any hazards identified by the owner is communicated to everyone conducting work activities or may be reasonably anticipated to conduct work activities in relation to the land infrastructure and any building or premises on the land. You will see there is shared responsibility among the various groups that could be present at the worksite to share information and communicate to one another information such as hazards present at the worksite. The Act has a new section on suppliers. This is a new addition to the Act. It means that any person who sells, rents, leases, erects, installs, or provides any equipment, or who sells or otherwise provides any harmful substances or explosives to be used by workers in respect to any occupation, project, or worksite now has legal accountabilities to ensure that the products are safe, and that they provide their client with a copy of the manufacturer's specifications or any other instructions for safe use, if such information exists. The Act also indicates that whenever a person is required to make a report, a plan, or a procedure based under any portion of the occupational health and safety legislation, they must do so in writing and on paper or downloaded or stored electronically so that it is readily available for reference by workers and the health and safety representative or committee. A good example of this is your emergency response plan. An employer must prepare a plan for potential emergency situations that could result in an evacuation or a rescue. Supervisors are a direct link between managers or owners and those they oversee. It is common for existing employees to get promoted into supervisory or management roles. These individuals will often have existing relationships with those they oversee. These types of relationships can make their job challenging at times. There may be times when your message is not going to be popular, making your job tougher. Being a strong communicator is essential to ensuring that your audience understands your message and what you need from them. This works in both directions, whether you're speaking to your company owners or to your direct reports. Effective communicators will customize their message for their particular audience in anticipation of the possible outcome. If you need help summarizing your message or a piece of communication, do not hesitate to reach out to someone that you trust. In the end, it's all about being an effective leader while keeping people safe. It is not a popularity contest. Of course, we want people to like and respect us. We all do. But that will be short-lived if a decision you make results in an injured coworker or direct report, or even a friend or family member that you work with. Another key change in our Act is the 3 workers' rights. It is essential that you recognize and respect workers' rights. Legislation states that all workers have the right to be informed, the right to participation, and the right to refuse. Let's look at these closer. Workers have the right to be informed of worksite hazards and the means to eliminate or control those hazards. Workers have the right to meaningful participation in health and safety activities pertaining to their work and worksite, including the ability to express health and safety concerns. Workers have the right to refuse dangerous work and the ability to work without being subject to discriminatory actions for exercising a right or fulfilling a duty imposed by the Act, the regulation, or the code. As noted previously, workers have a right to refuse dangerous work. As an employer, it's important that you understand how such reports must be handled. A worker may refuse to conduct work when a worker believes on reasonable grounds that there is dangerous conditions at the worksite or that the work constitutes a danger to the worker's health and safety or to the health and safety of another worker or another person. This is typically intended for workers that do not feel they have the appropriate training, experience, or equipment to conduct the job task. However, extends to all aspects of the worksite. If you have a worker refuse to conduct work because it is potentially dangerous, follow the OHS legislation to ensure that the situation is handled appropriately. As a supervisor, safety can become part of a balancing act. There may be times when you feel like safety is getting in the way of production or even the company's evolution or progression. It may be difficult at times to stay focused on the safety aspects when you're trying to meet deadlines or finish overdue projects. As a supervisor, your legal responsibilities remain the same regardless of production quotas, deadlines, or goals. When your health and safety management system is integrated into all parts of your business operations, such as purchasing, hiring, training, accounting, product development, etc., safety will be part of everything that you do and will no longer seem like an extra item added onto your plate. The alternative is risking a serious or catastrophic incident that could even affect the chances of your company surviving the incident. The key here is to integrate your safety activities into existing practices. Due diligence. What is meant by due diligence? You may have heard the term in the past and not really understood what that meant. According to the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, due diligence is a level of judgment, care, prudence, determination, and activity that a person would reasonably be expected to do under particular circumstances. When applied to occupational health and safety, due diligence means that employers shall take all reasonable precautions under the particular circumstances to prevent injuries or accidents in the workplace. This duty also applies to situations that are not addressed elsewhere in the occupational health and safety legislation. Reasonable precautions are also referred to as reasonable care and refers to the care, caution, or action a reasonable person is expected to take under similar circumstances. A term commonly used in the Alberta legislation is reasonably practicable. Reasonably practicable has been described by Labour Program Canada as taking precautions that are not only possible, but that are also suitable or rational given the particular situation. Determining what should be done is usually done on a case-by-case basis. How can due diligence be demonstrated? To exercise due diligence, an employer must implement a plan to identify possible workplace hazards and carry out the appropriate corrective actions to prevent accidents or injuries arising from these hazards. It is important to remember that a due diligence defense is built before an incident occurs, not afterwards. It is clearly written in the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety legislation that the employer is required to report certain types of incidents, conduct hazard assessments, conduct investigations, and much more. As we continue through this training session, we are going to review some of the key activities as they must be a focus for the entire leadership team. One of the first areas we're going to look at is worker competency. An employer must ensure that their workers are competent to perform their assigned job tasks. But what does competent mean? According to the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety Act, competent in relation to a person means adequately qualified, suitably trained, and with sufficient experience to safely perform work without supervision or with only a minimal degree of supervision. Training or education alone do not deem a person competent, nor does experience. A balanced combination of qualifications, such as formal training, along with hands-on training and experience, can better help ensure that a worker has what is needed to be deemed competent. Competency measures begin before workers are hired and are often determined when a company posts a job position and determines what qualifications or experience are required for that job position. This does not mean that you cannot hire somebody that does not have the needed qualifications or experience. It does mean that you are required to provide that new hire with the qualifications, training, or experience that would be needed to deem them competent. Consider competency to be a roadmap. The journey begins at the job posting, continues through the hiring and training phases, and continues through refresher and update training throughout their career. Next, we're going to look at incident reporting. It is important for employers to understand their internal and external incident reporting responsibilities. We're going to look at internal programs, reporting to the Director of Inspection or OHS, and also reporting to the Workers' Compensation Board or WCB. Alberta Occupational Health and Safety requires the reporting of certain types of incidents. These incidents include fatalities or the death of a worker, an injury or incident that results in a worker being admitted into the hospital as an inpatient. This means beyond a visit to the emergency department. Any unplanned or uncontrolled explosion, fire, or flood that causes a serious injury or that had the potential to cause a serious injury. The collapse or upset of a crane, derrick, or a hoist. The collapse or failure of any component of a building or structure necessary for the structural integrity of a building or a structure, as well as other mining-specific incidents. Another change to the Occupational Health and Safety Act in 2018 now requires the reporting of incidents that had the potential to cause serious injury, or are also known as PSIs. Employers or prime contractors must now report to the Director of Inspection, also known as OHS, any events that had the potential to cause serious injury. Potentially serious injuries can also be considered near-miss events that under a slightly different circumstance could have resulted in injury that would have been serious in nature. OHS officers want to know about these events because they will assist you in conducting an investigation and making changes before the same incident or event occurs and does result in a serious injury. Employers also have a responsibility to report specific types of workplace incidents to the Workers' Compensation Board. The WCB must be made aware of workplace incidents that caused injury or had the potential to cause serious injury within 72 hours of a company representative being made aware of such incidents. The 72-hour period is continual and includes evenings and weekends. An employer can be fined by the WCB if the employer's report is not submitted within 72 hours. For this reason, it is essential that all employees understand the reporting requirements and that you as a supervisor are taking actions whenever you're made aware of such incidents. The reports that must be submitted to the WCB include lost time. That's when a worker misses time away from work beyond the day of the incident because of a workplace illness or injury. Workplace fatalities. Permanent or temporary modification to a worker's work duties due to a workplace illness or injury. Medical treatment beyond that of a workplace first aider. Examples can include a medical doctor, a chiropractor, and a physiotherapist. Any workplace exposures that have caused occupational illness or had the potential to. And any medical expenditures such as prescription drugs, broken eyeglasses, broken dental appliances due to a workplace incident. To allow timely reporting to external sources, internal reporting must take place first. As a supervisor, it is important that you understand your company's internal reporting processes and follow them at all times. If you do not understand these procedures at your company, ask your safety representative or your manager for further training. Let's recap the reporting information we just reviewed. It is possible for a company with a serious incident resulting in a reportable injury to have to report to 3 different levels. All companies are required to have an internal reporting and investigation process that will allow the company to determine where the safety management system broke down and make the needed changes aimed at preventing the incident from happening again. When the incident meets the occupational health and safety reporting requirements, the company must advise the Director of Inspection, or OHS, of the time, the date, and the occurrence. An OHS officer may visit the employer and conduct an external investigation to determine if changes are needed and if charges will be laid. When the incident results in a worker requiring medical care beyond that of what a workplace first aider is able to provide, the employer is required to submit reports to the WCB. In Alberta, the occupational health and safety area of the government operates completely independently of our Workers' Compensation Board. The OHS body is the enforcement branch of our government, and the Workers' Compensation Board is no-fault insurance that provides medical care to ill or injured workers as needed. To simplify this, all incidents should be reported and investigated internally. Incidents that are reportable to OHS must be reported as soon as possible by calling their toll-free line. And whenever a worker requires medical care, the appropriate paperwork must be submitted to the Workers' Compensation Board. Typically, the majority of incidents are only subject to internal reporting and investigation processes, and paperwork is maintained in case it is ever questioned by the other bodies. Most incidents do not require reporting to OHS unless they are serious in nature or had the potential to cause serious injuries. The WCB is typically contacted when workers are injured or ill because of a workplace incident and their needs meet the reporting requirements, such as requiring further medical care, missing time from work, or requiring modifications to their work tasks, as the insurance will cover these accepted costs. Hopefully, this clarifies the reporting expectations. If you have further questions, be sure to contact your manager or your health and safety representative. Next, we're going to discuss hazard assessments. To determine how you can meet due diligence, it is important to understand where the risks are in your company. To identify the risks, you must complete a formal hazard assessment for all job positions or tasks that are being conducted within your company. These documents are known as formal hazard assessments. Formal hazard assessments must be documented and dated and must involve worker-level representatives. They must also be repeated at reasonably practical intervals and when changes to your operations, equipment, or processes occur, as well as any major additions or changes to your work environment. The results of these hazard assessments must be communicated to affected workers along with the control measures that are in place to prevent their exposure. It is suggested as a best practice that formal hazard assessments be updated annually, if not prompted sooner by change. To complement the formal hazard assessments, you must also implement a site-specific hazard assessment process. Site-specific hazard assessments must be done whenever a worker's work environment is changing. These are common for workers that work in multiple locations or those that conduct various types of job tasks. The idea with site-specific hazard assessments is that it allows the workers to stop their work, assess the hazards, plan the work, communicate the work plan, and then proceed in a safe manner. If your workers are not experiencing change, they may still need to conduct site-specific hazard assessments for infrequent job tasks that they may conduct. The premise behind these is to ensure that workers remain aware of the hazards for tasks that they do not conduct very often. Site-specific hazard assessments do not replace your formal hazard assessments, however, they should complement them. And each time the formal hazard assessments are being revised, the site-specific hazard assessments should be reviewed and any changes made. Next, we're going to review investigations. Sometimes even the best laid plans do not turn out the way we had intended. OHS legislation requires that employers or prime contractors conduct incident investigations whenever reportable incidents or PSIs, those incidents that had the potential to cause serious injury, occur. The purpose for internal investigations is to determine where your safety management system failed and correct the deficiencies with the goal of preventing the same or similar incidents from happening again in the future. As a best practice, all incidents should be investigated to some degree, including near misses. The level of investigation should be based on the potential loss, not the realized loss. Even if an OH&S officer is investigating an incident at your workplace, it is in your best interest to conduct a thorough investigation and fix your system. Legislation clearly indicates the expectation to do so. It is also noted in the legislation that internal investigations cannot be used against you in court unless you are deceitful or untruthful in your report. Root causes. Conducting investigations to determine how a company can prevent an incident from happening again is one of the most essential components of a health and safety management system. In order to conduct effective investigations, it's important that the investigators have investigation training. It is highly recommended that all members of a leadership team complete at least basic incident investigation training. It is critical that investigations result in the identification of root causes and how the company's management system failed. The diagram displayed on the screen demonstrates the differences between an immediate or direct cause and underlying or indirect causes and root causes, or how the health and safety management system is lacking. If we took an eye injury, for example, it would be simple to determine it's the employee's fault because they were not wearing the required PPE, or it was the equipment's fault because it released a chemical into the environment. Those would be immediate causes. However, conducting an investigation can also help to determine that there was guarding missing off of a piece of equipment, therefore causing the hazard to enter the worker's eye. Upon further investigation, it could be determined that although the supervisor knew workers in the area were required to wear safety glasses, they were never enforced by that supervisor, and that guarding from the piece of equipment in question had been removed in the past and was lost, therefore it was never reapplied. Those would be underlying causes. Looking at these underlying causes, it would be simple to stop there, buy a new piece of guarding, tell the worker to wear their safety glasses, and possibly even reprimand the supervisor for not properly supervising. However, Investigations should not stop there. They should continue all the way through an analysis of the company's health and safety management system to determine if the program is lacking in the first place and led to the underlying and immediate causes. The example displayed on the screen determined that during the orientation, it was never mentioned that employees are not allowed to remove guarding from equipment. It could also be determined that your inspection program was not monitoring the guarding on the equipment to ensure that it was always in place. Investigations can go in many directions, and these are only examples of the 3 different types of causes. All too often, incident investigations point fingers and assign blame and only address issues with one person involved in the incident. Incident investigations should look at all 3 levels of causes, determine what is needed to address all levels, make those changes, and communicate the lessons learned to everyone involved. Addressing incidents and sharing the learnings within your entire company can help prevent the same incident from happening again at any one of your facilities or locations. If you feel you need further training to conduct investigations, ask your manager or your health and safety representative. For the first time in Alberta, health and safety committees or safety representatives are required in most work sites. For each work site that has work estimated to last 90 days or more, the requirements indicate that those with 5 to 19 workers must have a designated health and safety representative. Work sites with 20 or more workers are required to establish a health and safety committee comprised of both worker and employer representatives. Employers with less than 5 people at a work site are required to establish specific health and safety programs relevant to their operations. There are specific training requirements for the safety representative and safety committee co-chairs. The requirements should be obtained at the time of implementation to ensure they are being met. It is clearly outlined that the duties of these representatives cannot affect their pay or their personal time. Violence and harassment. OHS legislation has enhanced the requirements for the prevention of and the actions taken when violence and harassment enter the workplace. As a leader, you're expected to take action whenever you see harassing behaviors. In violent situations, the emergency response plan should be your primary activity until everyone is out of harm's way. Following either situation, it is important that the appropriate reports are filed. Personal information is not shared unnecessarily. Those privy to the information understand the importance of confidentiality, and those affected by the violence or harassment understand that there are resources available to them. Following such situations, conduct an investigation and take any necessary actions aimed at future prevention. Following the implementation of the corrective actions, monitor the effectiveness of those actions to determine if they indeed address the concern. The information we have covered so far might seem impossible to achieve. Keep in mind you are not alone. Your company has already implemented a health and safety management system to assist you in meeting these requirements. All you have to do is familiarize yourself with the expectations and do your best to meet these. Remembering that the key component to a due diligence defense is a documentation that you keep along the way, because your due diligence defense is created prior to an incident happening, not afterwards. When trying to do the right thing day after day, your actions can be summarized into 5 categories, or the 5 C's: competence, communication, compliance, corrective actions, and continuous improvement. As we start to look at some of the actions that you can take to help meet your health and safety expectations, you may start to feel overwhelmed. You may already feel overwhelmed if much of this information is new to you. As we begin to look at the 5 C's, we will break them down and discuss specific actions that you can take in efforts to implement these goals into your work environment. As we review these actions, you may feel that you have already achieved what's expected, or you may determine that you are somewhere along the path. It is also important to recognize that at any point, each of us could excel in a specific area and struggle in others. It is a continual journey that may seem daunting at times, but will get easier as you work through the processes and implement them into your existing activities. Regardless of the path you choose, the efforts you invest will certainly be worth it in the end. The first C is competency. Competency can be divided into two parts, your own competency and the competency of those you oversee. Some of the actions you can take to help meet your own competency include ensuring you are competent to supervise others, verifying your knowledge of the jobs, equipment, and areas you are responsible for. If you have questions or require further training, contact your manager. Identify training requirements for each job task conducted under your supervision. Ensure you complete all of the training that those you supervise must take. It is essential that you understand the tasks and the safety aspects to the work you are overseeing. Without appropriate training, it is quite difficult for you to identify improper or unsafe acts or conditions. There may be exceptions for some professional job skills, such as a draft person. You would not be expected to complete the multiple years of education required to oversee a professional trade such as this. However, you would be expected to fully understand the safety-sensitive aspects of any job or job task that you oversee. You would also need to monitor your areas for new hazards, equipment, and training needs. Identify areas where you can improve your own knowledge and obtain the training or refresher training needed to ensure you remain competent to oversee your areas of accountability. The second part of competency is your worker competency. Actions you can take to help meet worker competency include identifying the competencies, the skills, the experience, and training needed for the positions that you supervise. Use those requirements to measure potential new hires, identify gaps, and create a plan to address them. Ways to address them can include further training, job shadowing, buddy systems, or others. Implement a process to ensure competencies are met before workers can work unsupervised. Confirm that those conducting the tasks have been trained as required. Be sure to address any training deficiencies and keep records. Monitor your workers for compliance. Stop any unsafe acts, correct unsafe behaviors, and document your actions. Identify areas where further or additional training might be required and implement as needed. As with all aspects of life, effective communication is crucial for success. When it comes to communicating health and safety information to your workers, some of the actions you can take include advising new workers of hazards before they begin working, advising everyone on or at your work site of potential hazards. As discussed previously in this presentation, employers and/or their representatives, such as yourself, have a legal responsibility to help ensure everybody in the vicinity of your work site is provided a safe environment and are made aware of potential hazards. This should include employees, contractors, vendors, and possibly even visitors or customers, depending on your work environment and the risk of exposure to each of these groups. This may seem like a daunting task, particularly if you have a significant amount of people or various groups of activities involved in your environment. Remember, you're expected to do what is reasonably practical for your workplace. Sometimes as simple as adding some safety information to a visitor sign-in book at your front reception area may be a reasonable and practical practice. It is likely that your safety program has already addressed the issues and you're simply required to follow the expectations. Other actions you can take include communicating changes to anyone affected. Be sure to assess change and communicate potential hazards and/or the addition of new hazards to anyone that could possibly be exposed to the hazard. This should include employees, contractors, vendors, and possibly even visitors or customers, depending on your work environment. Communicate health and safety information regularly to demonstrate the importance, and when your workers see that you're committed, for example, by taking the time needed for the program, it demonstrates the importance of the information. When workers feel that the activity is worth their effort, they are more likely to cooperate with expectations and follow your lead. Communicate findings from inspections, meetings, and investigations. And keep communication positive to demonstrate your own commitment. Even if you feel overwhelmed by the health and safety information or the expectations, do not demonstrate or communicate your feelings to your workers. Your workers will follow your lead, negatively or positively. Part of being an effective supervisor is being a leader. The leadership team has both legal accountabilities and internal responsibilities to keeping everyone safe. Next, we're going to look at compliance. The following are some of the actions you can take to try to meet internal and external compliance. First, you should start by obtaining a working knowledge of the health and safety legislation as it applies to your work area. It's important to understand that ignorance of the law is not a due diligence defense. Part of the reason that you're taking this training is to better understand what legislation requires of a company and their representatives such as yourself. Obtain a working knowledge of your company's health and safety management system as it pertains to your responsibilities and accountabilities. If you have questions or require further training, advise your manager. Next, you should apply the safety program and the legislation to your work activities. If you feel that parts of the program do not apply to your work area or do not address an issue, be sure to communicate this to the appropriate person. Your company safety program is only as good as its weakest link. You have a legal responsibility to address issues in your assigned area. For this reason, it is better for you to participate in the program and work towards continuous improvement with the program, remembering that ignorance of the law or acknowledging that your company's program was deficient and you did not take actions at that time does not lend itself towards a due diligence defense. Address reported concerns, hazards, and incidents in a timely manner. As soon as you are aware of an unsafe condition, regardless of the reporting source, you have a responsibility to mitigate worker exposure. Sometimes the immediate actions that are needed may be temporary in nature, and a more permanent, larger picture solution may be needed later. It may take some time to complete investigations and implement permanent solutions. Be sure to look at both immediate and longer-term corrective actions whenever you're addressing an unsafe act or condition. Ensure that internal and external reporting requirements are being met in a timely manner. Document all actions. Documentation is often the largest component of a due diligence defense. Samples of such documentation can include hazard assessments, training records, inspection records, equipment maintenance records, past incident and investigation reports, and health and safety communication records. When documenting any health and safety information, be sure the information is clear and concise and can serve its intended purpose, particularly if it is not needed for many years. Someone else might need to explain the purpose of your records in the future. The next C we're going to review is corrective actions. The following are activities you can participate in to ensure that corrective actions remain a key focus. First, you want to follow through on your own training needs, no matter how busy you get. We all get busy from time to time, and it's easy to put our own training needs on a back burner, particularly when we're short-staffed or exceptionally busy. Next, you want to ensure that those you supervise complete all required training and refresher training. As with your own training, it is essential that everyone is deemed competent to conduct their assigned job tasks. Address deficiencies from inspections in a timely manner. Review gaps from your core audit reports and actively work towards addressing issues in your area. A core audit is an assessment of your management system and, in short, assesses the program as it pertains to the leadership team's due diligence. Although a core audit is a system audit, not a compliance audit, it directly reflects legislative requirements and would become a significant part of your due diligence defense if ever required. The actions from the core audit should not belong to the safety representative and/or the safety committee. Each member of the leadership team should take interest in the deficiencies as they are your deficiencies as well. Take action after incidents to correct unsafe acts or conditions from both a short-term and long-term focus. Complete all assigned tasks in a timely manner. Timely should be based on the level of risk it poses to those affected. Taking action in a timely manner not only helps to prevent the issue from causing an incident or further loss, but also demonstrates to your team your commitment to the safety program. The last C we're going to review is continuous improvement. Actions you can take to demonstrate continuous improvement include understanding the health and safety program, both responsibilities and procedures. When you understand the health and safety program and the various activities that you are expected to be actively involved in, it will be easier for you. If you don't understand the expectations or have questions, be sure to ask the appropriate individual or review legislation to find out what is required. Ensure problem areas are not ignored. You have a legal responsibility to ensure that health and safety issues do not go unaddressed. Regardless of the reporting source, such as direct verbal reporting, hazard reports, hazard assessments, inspections, incidents, work refusals, violence and harassment complaints, etc., actions must be taken in a timely manner. Work towards resolving health and safety issues. It is beneficial if everyone within your company takes an active role in helping to resolve issues. Safety does not belong to one person or one department. It is everybody's responsibility. Finish all assigned tasks. It is easy to get distracted or sidetracked. We are all busy. It is essential that corrective actions are taken in a timely manner as part of your due diligence commitment. If you find you cannot complete all of your assigned tasks, talk to your manager to determine your priorities and if there is assistance available to you. Monitor activities to identify areas where change could help improve your health and safety system. Continually work towards improving the health and safety system. Remember, you're still accountable to address issues and work towards providing a safe work environment, no matter how busy you are. A critical part of ensuring that the actions you're taking are working is to follow these simple steps. First, clearly set your goals. Ask yourself what you are trying to achieve. The second step is to take the actions needed to meet those goals, determining what is required, who will be involved, and the timelines for completion. Thirdly, check the results to determine if the changes or actions taken have met their intended purpose. And finally, make adjustments as needed. Although these are seen as 4 steps, they can also be seen as a continuous cycle, because when you need to make adjustments, you should return back to the first step and set your goal for making that adjustment and work through the steps once again. Documentation. Occupational health and safety requires that all incident records be maintained for a minimum of 2 years. Partnerships suggest that all companies keep OH&S records for a minimum of 3 years as a best practice. However, it is suggested that all records be kept for much longer, particularly communication and training or competency records. A significant amount of documentation or OHS records may be beneficial in a due diligence defense and could possibly be needed many years down the road. However, this is a company decision. Where are you in this journey? Are you constantly trying to achieve something that seems out of reach or that you don't understand? Or are you on your pathway to doing your part and being able to prove your due diligence? Just like learning any job task or skill, it takes time and experience to build competency. Health and safety responsibilities are no different. However, it is achievable if you set your mind to it and apply practices consistently. It is important that you ask for help as you need it, and remember, you are not alone.